We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining. I know that there's a bunch of interest in what's happening in appropriations.
Recording in progress.
Downstairs, so appreciate you being here. Today we have Laurie Bishop, Vice Chair of Judiciary, joining us in part because we got a bunch of questions in the first half of the session about what was happening with the constitutional amendments, the referrals that were filed but weren't moving. And we saw this week the start of what we assume are going to be a bunch of proposed changes to the Montana Constitution. And there were two hearings this week, one on House Bill 517, which really undercuts the constitutionally granted authority and guaranteed authority of the Board of Regents, and House Bill 405, which is sort of a posse comitatus, county supremacy, citizen grand jury proposal from Representative Sheldon Galloway, and we anticipate more to come. There was another hearing today on a Fielder amendment. So our worry is that Republicans are going to push through a bunch of changes to the Constitution. We know that, well over 60% of Montanans do not want changes to the Constitution, regardless of the topic. They like the Constitution. They are accustomed to the rights and protections and freedoms that the Constitution grants. And we're very worried about how intent the GOP seems to be on damaging the Constitution and undercutting those rights. So wanted to spend some time talking about that today with you all. And then of course, at the end, answer any questions that you have on other things happening this week. But with that, I will kick it over to Senator Flowers.
Thanks, Kim. And yeah, we're seeing similar Republican attacks on the Montana Constitution in the Senate as well. The one that was already presented was from Senator Emmerich. That was Senate Bill 372. And that took away attempted to take away Montanans' rights to elect their own judges and give that authority to the legislature. Fortunately, that was tabled in committee. Some others that are coming, Senator Manzella has introduced Senate Bill 272, which would create a constitutional office of sheriff and grant them not unlimited, but way more powers than they have now, and that they don't enjoy Montana law. We saw, I think, similar efforts on the House side before transmittal, and there was some great reporting on that. It does have links. This kind of approach does have links to the militia movement, white supremacists, and hopefully we'll be able to put that down on the Senate side. A couple of others that are still LCs are LC 299, requested by Senator Hertz, and that gives the legislature the power to create runoff elections. It's kind of interesting to me that we've got this coming at the same time they're trying to prohibit ranked choice voting. Again, in my mind, I think our Republican colleagues must see a political advantage here, and that's why they're pushing this. LC 4283, requested by Senator Keith Regier, would give full power to the legislature to approve redistricting maps. And it's kind of a simple change in a way. It goes from changing the words recommend to approve. So it would give the legislature ultimate approval on those maps. Obviously, this invites gerrymandering, and certainly Montanans don't want to change the approach we take now, which has a bipartisan a commission. It's worked well, and this would take us in exactly the opposite direction, which is to once again invite gerrymandering. We've been clear on I think Montana Democrats in general, we're going to fiercely oppose all these changes to the Constitution. Kim referenced earlier the broad support that the Montana Constitution has in its current form, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure we don't start chipping away at that. With that, I'll turn it back over to Laurie.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to make myself go away there. Thank you, Pat. I think, I can speak to just what we're seeing in the Judiciary Committee and what we've seen over the arc think of this session, what we're seeing, but I really speak to this from the perspective of having served on judiciary for the last 4 sessions and watched the changes that we can observe as the Republican, almost supermajority and now effective, complete supermajority are in place, and the ways in which that power is being used to solidify or infringe on the existing rights of Montanans. And the Constitution is obviously really ripe for that. So while leading up to transmittal, we saw just, I think one or two that made their way into the committee, but we're waiting on that hearing. It was clear that they were just waiting in order to get through the general bill deadline. And now that we are moving into the space where, with the constitutional amendments having a later deadline now, here it is, it's Tuesday, and we are finishing up our 3rd hearing. So we can tell that now the floodgates are beginning to open. You can see in the queue there's more coming, and we're beginning to see what the ideas are that are being brought forward. And in some cases, there are ideas that have already been patently turned down, and they're just out of step with Montanans, and I think out of step with what they want. And that's as simple as just Montanans being clear that they want their constitution protected, but I think it gets even further than that when we can see the ideas that are being brought forth and how they really are an overreach of the rights and the privileges that Montanans have already been accustomed to. Would you like me to go into details about a couple? Is it helpful to just speak to some of the ones? Okay, great. Happy to do that. Just in the last couple of days, do you want to ask a question real quick?
I can wait for you to done.
Okay, great. Well, we can see I think yesterday's a really good example. We saw 2 yesterday. We saw 517, which is effectively really pulling down what would be the granted powers to the Board of Regents. That was a very intentional provision during our constitutional convention to address what was then a really failing university system, and has turned it into a thriving university system by protecting it from the political whims of the legislature. And now we saw House Bill 405, which would take grand juries as we understand them, which are really about protecting people from government overreach and actually effectively giving the people the power to override even the government that says they don't want to go after people in the courts. And so we saw those 2 brought yesterday, and then this morning the constitutional amendment in regards to how we are harvesting wildlife in this state and providing for extended rights that would have primacy in that realm. And so I think those are all issues where we've got pretty clear feedback from Montanans about what they think. And we just see that being able to do that, it's really just aiming for the legislature to have more power.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. I think, the overall message that I think we're receiving from Republicans is they're very frustrated that the Constitution is the only thing standing in their way of really sort of attacking the rights of individual Montanans, and they're frustrated about decisions that have been made on legislation they've passed, and so now they're going after the Constitution. So that's sort of the message we're receiving loud and clear. With that, I will start taking questions, and they can be on Constitution or, like always, like on anything. Dietrich, what's up?
Yeah, so on the sorry about my sunlight. On the Constitution to start out with. So if you're correct that as Representative Bishop says that like these policies are out of step with Montanans, right? Like Republicans, when we push them on this stuff, they note that all this stuff, if it passes the legislature, will go to a popular vote. So why not trust the voters to decide what is and isn't like in step with like what the Montana public thinks?
The voters, if they want to put an amendment to the Constitution on the ballot, they can do that through the citizens initiative process. And our role as the legislature, as I see it, is to solve problems that we see facing our communities. And the Constitution is popular. If citizens want to make changes to the Constitution, they can make changes to the Constitution through the citizens initiative process.
I would add to that, I think by putting it on the ballot, especially coming from the legislature, I really think it opens up the opportunity for unlimited amounts of money to be able to try and influence that type of decision. And I think that's not good government in that case.
Do a follow-up?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Caleb.
Thank you.
Hi.
Good morning. I have just a couple of logistical questions on the constitutional proposals. Is there a limit to the number that can be on a ballot in any given year?
So not to my knowledge, Laurie, do you?
No, not to my knowledge either. And I think it's interesting. I mean, we have heard testimony saying you should logistically think about it, and you should, that warning Republicans, in light of the number of proposals that are being brought. But we've just never seen this sort of landscape in my time before, or I think in recent history, where there's just so many attempts, and it's clearly linked to the power that they have in order, with an assumption that if they can keep the pressure on their entire caucus, that they can get this across the finish line. But again, I think it's based on this idea that I think many of them are convinced that the power that they hold in this building is representative of the electorate outside of this building. And I think to Eric's point, that's not necessarily the case, but I think when we're talking about going into a general election, when lots of things are going to be on people's ballots in their community, both at the state and local level, I do think it's inconsiderate of voters, both in terms of what they sent us here to do and what their expectations are in the next election.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Kayla, did you have a follow-up?
I have a silly logistical question on how the 2/3, how you get to that. Do the bills just follow the same path as typical bills? And if they hit 100 after the second chamber, then they're good?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it. Any other questions?
Shifting gears. What was I going to ask about? Budget stuff. What are you hearing about as we're trying to kind of think through what the big chunks of spending bills floating around are, including your trust fund bill, all the other stuff. What are you hearing about how that's going to shake out procedurally? Where the decisions on those negotiations are going to be happening, and what the big balls in play are. Again, the force there. But
so I think from my perspective, a lot of the focus has been on House Bill 2, from at least from on the House side, from Republicans and from our team on appropriations, really working hard to try to fix some things that we think are broken about the work that got done in subcommittee. I've said to you guys before, it really concerns me, all of the spending proposals that are out right now that have gotten a positive, my bill wouldn't be on a status sheet because it hasn't gotten a positive vote. But, we're looking at, 2.6 billion. And I don't have a sense of how Republicans want to prioritize those things. If I'm being generous, I think that, perhaps they want to move House Bill 2 first and then focus in on the sort of what we call cat and dog bills. But it's really concerning to see, and we have another Fielder's tax bill is on the floor today. It's another $110 million a year, something like that. It's just, it feels irresponsible to me, to just be moving these through so quickly. But, in terms of what is in play, I think we have a lot of work to do still on targeted tax relief. We have a lot of work to do on housing. We haven't even started our work on childcare yet. And I think all of those are areas where there is bipartisan energy. Representative Buckley has her Best Beginnings bill in Human Services this afternoon. We're excited for that. We spent a lot of time listening to the department, getting information from the department to get that bill better than Representative Howell's bill was. So we're excited that has Republican co-sponsors, and I think it has some energy. That's a big priority for us. The housing trust fund bill that you saw yesterday, Dietrich, like I said in that hearing, whatever the number is, let's make sure that we're addressing this issue. And so we're going to work hard to find it. If it's not my bill, another vehicle for that. I don't know, Pat, if you have anything to add from the Senate side on that.
Well, I think the one of the things that's still really missing is any permanent property tax relief. We haven't seen that, and I'm hopeful that before we get out of here, we can get some solution there, as well as some solution for ongoing rental assistance in a place like Bozeman, if we don't solve more immediately this housing issue, we are going to be jeopardizing not only lives of individuals, but a lot of businesses in a place like Bozeman that needs workers. And to date, we don't have any real solution there. So I'm hoping we're still going to see something on that front.
So thinking specifically about the very tight rental markets like Bozeman, Senator Flowers, what types of solutions do you think would help there, and how much would they cost?
Well, the two that have already been put forward that I liked were by Senator Dunwell and by Representative Hamilton, and those were the tax credits for landlords who are willing to rent below market. So, if those weren't the right solution, if there's something like that we can build on, I think that's what we need to explore. But it's got to be, the thing I liked about both of those is that could have an immediate effect. So it can create immediate incentives for landlords to reduce their rents because they know they're going to be compensated in some way. And I think there's a lot of that going on, but I think at least I know of that, a lot of that going on already in Bozeman, but I think with some incentive, it could really be a big part of the solution in the short term.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see Amy's joining. There aren't any other questions unless we can give Amy a chance and she just jumped on.
No, I just realized what time it was. I was going to just listen in, but
oh, sure.
I don't have anything intelligent to say.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for being on, you guys.
Real quick before you wrap, it looks like Michael put a question in the chat if you want to read that one.
Oh, sure. Oh, so it's thoughts on yesterday's tax relief package being signed. Yeah, that's $1 billion of a tax package that disproportionately benefits the wealthiest Montanans. It gives one-time rebates on property tax. Like Pat said, it doesn't engage in targeted permanent tax relief, which is what folks that are actually getting pinched need. Pretty disappointing overall that that package got rushed through and signed so quickly and out in advance of House Bill 2 and out in advance of serious proposals that are actually going to address the long-term challenges that Montanans face. A one-time property tax rebate isn't going to do it in Bozeman or the Flathead or many other communities where people really need serious proposals for long-term relief. So we're disappointed in that. And we're hoping that on the back half of the session that we can actually address some long-term problems with a generational opportunity to do that. Pat, did you have thoughts on the signing?
The only thing I would add, Kim, is that one of the concerns I have is kind of the ongoing impact on our budget for some of these tax cuts. And I don't believe we've fully thought out the implications for our revenue needs down the road. And how is this going to translate then into cuts in services that Montanans are counting on in subsequent sessions? And I don't think that's been well thought out. And I think we're all going to pay the price here in years to come.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.